Mesquite, hello Nevada, hello America, and welcome to the Mesquite Weekly. I am your host, Rudy Mortel, and we are now bringing you a special pre-election, November 6th, that's Tuesday, pre-election special. And as you know, Tuesday is the day that we've all been dreaming of, or actually dreading. But I thought I'd let you know first that, you know, the candidates that you're voting for, congressional race, Senate race, governor's race. Well, you know who picked those candidates? Well, there's only two in each race. And do you know who picked those candidates? 5% of the people that were eligible to vote last June in the primary. So, 95% of you, unfortunately, even if you pick a candidate, will not be represented because you never voted for that candidate when they were appointed. And now you get to vote for them, whether you want them or not. Anyway, if you don't believe the numbers, please look at the MesquiteWeekly.com, and it's the video archive. And if you look at the one for Mesquite Week, Volume 3, you'll get a clear explanation as to why 95% of you are not represented in this election because you didn't vote in the primary. But the reason I'm doing this broadcast is not to tell you about any of the candidates, but to tell you about some important issues that are on the ballot. Two of them that are really going to impact you, and I do mean your wallet, are the initiative for energy choice. That's question number 3. And if you think you have a choice, it says energy choice, and you must have a choice. But be careful of the word choice. It's very tricky. A little bit further, to explain it a little bit further, I talked to a gentleman who represents the yes side of this ballot question, and I talked to him about a couple of things, and please listen to what he has to say.
Okay, Bradley Mayer, BradleyMayer.
And your presentation today was well accepted by many of the folks here. On whose behalf are you giving these presentations?
So, Nevadans for Affordable Clean Energy Choices.
Okay. Is that a what kind of an organization?
That's a ballot advocacy PAC.
It's a PAC?
Yeah, it's a ballot advocacy group is really what they call it.
Do you know who supports the group?
Sure. Las Vegas Sands, MGM, Valley Electric, and Switch.
Okay. During your presentation, I noticed that you made a reference to the possibility of the co-ops might continue to be able to operate just as they always have. Yet the question 3 specifically prohibits the support of energy monopolies. And it's been tossed about. Are the co-ops an energy monopoly?
Well, so it actually bans electric generating monopolies in the state of Nevada.
Only generating.
Correct. And so in the case of Overton Power District, they don't do any generation. Really, Overton Power District is already operating under energy choice in a way, because what they're doing is aggregating all of their constituents together and going out and procuring power for them on the open market.
So will the customers...
And the initiative allows for aggregation, and that's that part of the initiative where I talked about the ability to cooperatively produce or procure electricity in association with others. That's what co-ops do.
So that means that customers within the co-op grid will still be able to have a choice of energy provider, or will they then only be subject to the energy provider that the co-op selects?
So, of course, a lot of that in the initiative, of course, we talk about how there's two things that we're putting in the Constitution. One is a ban on electric generating monopolies. 2 is the duty for the legislature to create the new market by July 1st, 2023. So these are all issues that will be borne out in the legislature. I know from our perspective, we believe the rural co-op should maintain local control, that their federal hydropower contract should be protected, and that any additional choice that happens should be administered at the local level through whatever regulatory body they have.
That's not explicitly stated that the hydroelectric electric contracts will be protected? It's
Uh,
not
so-
in question
so
3, but
again,
that's hopefully something the legislatures will do?
Of course, yes, exactly. All this specifically stated is that we can't have electric generating monopolies in the state of Nevada, and that the legislature must set the new market by July 1st, 2023.
All right. And one more question. You mentioned something about over-earnings. What are over-earnings? Can you tell me what they are?
So over-earnings. So as it is now, NB Energy is a regulated monopoly.
I'm an accountant. Does that mean
Gotcha.
profits, operating margins, or what are we talking
So
about?
let me explain it. So NB Energy, of course, is being a regulated monopoly by the Public Utilities Commission. So they are allowed to earn up to a 9.8% return upon their investment. Based on testimony that was given before the PUC, they've regularly earned 11, 12% on their investment, and so that difference equates essentially over earnings, and it's hard to say whether that's all profit or not, but
well, no, it's a simple entry.
Amount of money over earned above and beyond their allowable rate of return of about $232,400,000.
These operating earnings eventually wind up in retained earnings, or not?
Well, you're the accountant, not me, so
it's a loaded question. Well,
you're the accountant, not me.
I mean, even the nonprofits have over earnings.
Sure.
You need to have over earnings. You need to have reserves for
Sure.
contingencies such as
But I guess our point
grid.
is that they're allowed to earn about a 9.8% or 9.8% return.
That's their actual profits. Right?
11, 12% return. And I think our point there is that those kind of inefficiencies don't exist in competitive markets. They do exist under monopoly markets.
Yeah. Would you have a breakdown as to when somebody provides an offer for so much per kilowatt as to what that consists of? There's the energy producer, there's the broker that puts it all together. Do you know what those components
I'm
would
not
be
trying
for
to
any?
understand your question.
Well, when you have somebody that says, you have an energy choice now, we're offering you energy at 8 cents a kilowatt, okay? And you pay this to, I suppose, eventually to the person that provides it to you. So that's the energy generator, the broker that puts it all together, because there's more than one energy generator in this new company, right? And they need to have a structure of what they do with their rates. There's a certain amount is profit, a certain amount is, operating earnings. There are brokers that are involved in getting these contracts together for the various energy providers so they can provide it to a consumer in Nevada. So would you know what the breakdown is on some of those rates that may or may not, may be charged in the future?
The way it works today under NB Energy is we pay a bundled rate. And so how it works is that customers that are under NB Energy have a bundled rate, and so they pay.
That's not the question. The question is when you have a provider that comes to the marketplace, says this is how much we were offering you to pay for the energy charge per kilowatt.
Right.
What does that? Overton's going to deliver and add their own charges or whatever. So what does that mean? And do you still have a breakdown that energy charge as to who gets what?
I guess that was the point I was getting at. So today it's a bundled rate. So the transmission and distribution and power costs are all bundled into one.
I know, it'll be unbundled.
And it'll be unbundled under Energy Choice. And so you'll have separate charges for transmission, distribution, and separate charges for power costs.
We're not talking about
and those will be laid out on the bill.
Right. What we don't know is, the portion for the energy charge. I mean, there are components to that also. Some of those energy charges, the revenue from that goes to pay for the producer, to pay for the contractor, the company that generates, like Enron. Oh, bad word. Like Enron, okay? They had nothing to do with distribution and taking care of maintenance of the lines and the substations, but they had to do with what? Contracting among energy providers to drop it into energy grids. And that was the extent of it. For that, they obtained a substantial amount of money, I think. Otherwise, they wouldn't do it. So, do you know what the breakdown would be, typical?
So I don't. Okay. So I'm not sure I'm following your question, but I don't think I know.
Oh, it's hard. It's a very hard to follow question. It's a very hard to follow
what the breakdown is.
It's a very hard to follow question. The question simply
I can follow up with you and
what
try
are
to
the
get the right
components
answer.
of the rates?
Not sure I'm aware of that.
Okay. Well, tell me what you've heard. I know what you're thinking, okay? I mean, he sounds pretty good, doesn't he? Well, actually, when I asked him about this thing called over-earnings, this is not anything you'll ever find in a financial statement. Even he didn't know what it was. What are over-earnings? So why even mention that? I mean, was he trying to confuse somebody? Are they trying to confuse somebody with over-earnings? All right, that's beside the point. When you ask him about what it is exactly that your energy choice will be, and he simply said it's this. It's simply to choose which person or which provider, in other words, which producer of energy you will pick, not the provider, because the Overton Power District doesn't produce any energy at all, believe it or not. Nevada Energy produces very little energy, believe it or not. And none of the other rural districts, the co-ops, the nonprofits, produce any energy at all. They buy energy. They go out into the free market and they make the energy choice for you. Well, wouldn't you rather make the energy choice yourself? Well, it sounds like a great idea, but can anyone tell us what that energy choice, how much will it cost us? And I asked this question, as you can see, the same gentleman who supports the yes vote, and he simply said he doesn't know what that number is. Well, we know what that number is because we have it on our bill every month now. It's very low. I can speak for Overton Power District. We have an energy bill of less than 9 cents per kilowatt hour. And the reason that is because they don't make any money at all. It's a nonprofit. It's a co-op. The reason that it's so low is because they pick energy providers, such as hydroelectric energy, which they can buy for 2 cents a kilowatt. You may ask, why are they charging us 8.5 cents? Well, there's a lot of electric lines to maintain. There are substations. There are tons of costs, which they're going to continue to bill you whether you make an energy choice or not. The component that we don't know how much it will be, and this is what this gentleman was unable to tell us. The component is the amount that the energy producers will bill you for. How much will that be? In the past, many of you will remember a situation called Enron, and that was horrific for California when they picked an energy choice. Did they get hosed? And I think it's their governor that was recalled because of this issue, because of what he had agreed to be doing, or what he agreed to have done. And not only was it expensive, it was also inefficient and ineffective. They had brownouts, they had power shortages, they had power outages. I was in the middle of one. I was pumping gasoline. I think it was in north of San Francisco, in Santa Monica, not Santa Monica, in Santa Ana County, or Santa Ana Township. It was north of San Francisco. And I was in the middle of pumping, and all of a sudden the pump shut down. And I had maybe 2 gallons in the car at that point. Wow. It didn't come on for another 3 hours. I was really close to running out of gas again. Anyway, to make a long story short. We also asked a number of individuals about energy choices. We asked Joe Hardy, our district senator, our state senator. Joe said, energy choice is nice, but the word choice is very important because be careful what you wish for. The word choice is important because it may not be the right word to use. Also, it says, if you want an energy choice, there's really no reason why you want to make a constitutional amendment. And if you look at the constitutional amendment, let's see what it's going to be. What does it say? What is really on this amendment? It simply says this: shall Article 1 of the Nevada Constitution be amended to require the legislature to provide by law for the establishment of an open, competitive retail energy market that prohibits the granting of monopolies and exclusive franchises for the generation of electricity. Well, first of all, what monopolies? We don't have any in Nevada by any definition of the word monopoly. The co-ops are duly elected board of directors, elected by whom? We, the people, elect them. And they then appoint a management team that does what this board of directors that was elected by us, the people, does for them. And this is true for, I think there are 8 rural energy districts that are co-ops or nonprofits, and not monopolies, because they don't produce energy at all. What they do is they buy energy. I believe Overton Power District buys hydroelectric energy, which are very cheap, as I mentioned before. Lincoln Power District also buys hydroelectric power, a ton of it, 75% of their power distribution or their power is purchased from hydroelectric. It's not as cheap as Overton Power because of the transmission. It has to be transmitted over long distances to get there, but nevertheless. It's therefore, what's more expensive is the actual distribution of the electricity. So I believe Lincoln Power District is a bit more expensive than Overton Power District because of the transmission line length difference. So, anyway, in order to get a bit more information, we also consulted a number of people that had worked on the Governor's Commission for the Energy Choice Initiative. And they sat on this commission for 2 years, and the panel was composed of not just legislature. The governor appointed private individuals from various industries and from our legislatures. We had the number of two senators, one senator, two senators, I believe, were on the board, an assemblyman, one of the co-op managers, and happens to be David Luttrell from Lincoln Power District, and they studied this issue for, the Public Utilities Commission was also a participant in this study. They studied this in this ballot proposal for 2 years. Although officially they did not conclude, okay, they said we will not, say yes or no to the ballot initiative because that wasn't the purpose of it. But they were, I suppose, determined to be prepared in the case it passes and to do certain things that I think were asked for in the initiative if it didn't pass. Either way, they were preparing to do some legislation. What they did summarize on is another question that's on the ballot, which is question 6. I'll read that to you. Shall Article 4 of the Nevada Constitution be amended to require, beginning in the calendar year 2022, it's about the time when the Energy Choice Initiative would be required to be adopted or adopted into law, that all providers of electric utility services who sell electricity to retail customers, that's us, for consumption in Nevada, generate or acquire incrementally larger percentage of electricity from renewable energy sources so that by calendar year 2030, not less than 50% of the total amount of electricity sold by each provider to its retail customers in there comes from renewable energy sources. Well, again, there's no definition as to what a renewable energy source is. Lincoln Power District may already qualify because 75% of them comes from hydroelectric power. That's renewable. It depends on the definition, I suppose. But that's up to the lawmakers to decide within the next few years. But I propose on question 3, since the fair free market will probably take care of it by itself, as green energy or renewable energy sources become more or less expensive, they will be competitive in the retail market. But it shouldn't be forced upon anyone. So as a constitutional amendment, I don't see it as being a yes. I don't see it as being a no. We're kind of neutral. Back to question number 3. I do see it as a definite no. Don't do it. The D-Thai Bistro, a refreshing oasis in the desert. D-Thai Bistro may be the only Thai restaurant in Mesquite, but it ranks among the finest in the state of Nevada, as well as southwestern Utah and northeastern Arizona. An extensive menu features many Asian delights. Traditional Thai dishes include all your favorites: Pad Thai, Pad See Ew, Pad Won Sen, Tom Yum soup, Tom Kha soup, and a variety of curries are prepared and served to your pleasure. The chefs and the staff at the Thai Bistro provide a pleasant, friendly atmosphere. The dishes are delightfully presented, fresh and superbly flavored, and delicious. My own personal favorite, spring roll, is not on the menu, but if you ask for the Rudy roll, the chef will be happy to oblige. Lunch and dinner are served daily, starting at 11 a.m. and reopening after lunch at 4:30 p.m. for dinner. The bistro is closed on Sundays. Takeout orders are welcome. The D-Type Bistro has obtained a solid 5-howl rating from the Mesquite Weekly, and customer reviews consistently provide glowing praise for this family-owned and managed house of Thai culinary delights. In order to obtain a bit more expertise, we went to Pioche, Nevada. And yes, that's how you pronounce it. It's Pioche. And we went there to visit Lincoln Power District number 1, the manager of it, David Luttrell. And he's actually in Castleton, which is on the other side of the mountain. The entire area needed electric power, and because it was so rural, had a hard time getting it. But eventually in 1933, in order to support the mining activities, mining was very big over there, it initially started in 1864, a long time ago. And they devised a number of ways and means without any electric power to actually do the mining, which was made easier for them in 1933, okay? The silver mines, however, played out, and there were some lead zinc deposits which were quite profitable during World War II and in high demand, but that eventually petered out. So mines in 1978 were no longer the lifeblood of Pioche. But Pioche remained an attractive tourist town, a bit of history, central to the Great Basin, central to a number of other attractions in the area, and so tourism continues to be its champion. They're also agricultural, ranching, okay? But anyway, we went there to visit, and we have some interesting stories to tell about the town, but not this time around. We are going to speak to the general manager of the Lincoln Power District, number 1, David Luttrell. And David was also, as I mentioned before, on the commission, the governor's commission to study the Energy Choice Initiative. And here is David.
I am, as you just said, Dave Luttrell. I actually have a mechanical engineering degree from the University of Nevada, Reno, and a master's in business administration from Arizona State University. I entered after college the utility industry, and have been in the utility industry for over 30 years, a large part of that as a consultant to various utilities, including Lincoln County Power District. I came here as the general manager 7 years ago. I've completed almost 7 years exactly to the day serving here. And that's allowed me to not just serve here in Lincoln County Power District, but I'm also the president of the Nevada Rural Electric Association, which is the association of all the rural utilities in the state of Nevada. And most recently, I was privileged to serve on the Governor's Committee for Energy Choice, taking a look at that initiative and truly trying to understand its impact, not just in rural Nevada, but statewide as well.
Can you perhaps give us a little bit of information about the Lincoln Power District? Number 1, is it now?
Certainly.
It used to be number 3?
No, it's always been number 1. So we like to rub that into the folks in Overton. They're Overton Power District number 5. We tell them all the time we're number 1. And there are 3 actual power districts in the state, the other one being Alamo Power District number 3. All 3 of those utilities were created under the Power District laws. It's since been changed, but it was Chapter 72 back in the day. We were the first one. That's why we were given the number 1, and then they started numbering them on odd numbers for some reason back in 1935, so you can tell when the others were created. We were, like I say, created in 1935. Really the driving force and the primary reason was the mining industry here in Lincoln County had a need for power to run the mines and the mills that were really the driving force in this county. And as some of your folks might know, around the turn of the century and a little before, Lincoln County was actually at one time the county seat for a combined Lincoln and Clark County. It wasn't until Clark County started to grow later that the counties were split in two and a county seat set in Las Vegas. But back in those days, this was the industry and the powerhouse for this part of the state. And so the mining industry brought in the power district, created the laws, created the power district, and funded the initial construction of all the transmission and substation facilities to get power at that time from Hoover Dam to Lincoln County to run the mines and the mills.
The power district, is that essentially a state charter? Is it a co-op, or is it a kind of a blend of the two, the hybrid?
So it is actually a political subdivision of the state. The three power districts that are in existence are subdivisions of the state. We're currently operating under Nevada Revised Statute Chapter 318, which is a general improvement district law, but there's a specific subsection on power districts. So we operate more akin to a municipality in certain respects, especially in respect to governance. But we are more akin to an electric cooperative in the way we actually go about carrying out business, providing electric service to rural Nevada. So again, we're kind of one of those odd mixtures of an animal that kind of fits in its own category.
Would it be fair to say that the power district, I suppose, in its operations is like a co-op, but in its implementation is more like a branch of the state government? It has, I suppose, a voting entity. It's an entity that has established a certain, like a municipality.
Right.
Board of directors that you need to vote for.
Right, exactly. You summarized it well. We operate a lot like a rural utility, a cooperative utility, providing the same function, but again, more of a governance structure from a more, like I say, political subdivision of the state, more like that. So we actually have a 5-member board here in Lincoln County Power District. They are just like a city council person would be. They are elected from the general population of the area we serve. So individuals can run for that office and be on the ballot, and majority votes them in. We do not, here in Lincoln County, have voting precincts. I believe Overton Power District actually does, with separate members for different parts of the area it serves. Alamo Power District does not as well, but so ours are all at large, so whoever gets the most votes in the election gets seated on our board.
So essentially the Nevada law allows, I guess, the power districts to operate as a political entity, not a political entity, but a government entity?
Yes.
But regardless, I mean, the co-op doesn't require the government entity part of the co-op. It's simply a non-profit organization which operates like a non-profit organization. So the law, the Nevada law, only addresses the political organization or the administrative organization.
Right. Well, cooperatives in the state of Nevada. So we're organized. We operate under NRS 318. Chapter 318 spells out what we can do in terms of our service. And so for us, we're really here to provide a public service, a public good, to provide electricity to an underserved area of the state. That's really kind of the role we as Power District fulfill. Cooperatives, they're organized under Chapter 81 and 82 of the NRS, so they're a completely different chapter. They're nonprofit corporations. They're governed by their membership, because each person in a cooperative is an actual owner of that organization, right. So they vote for their own board of directors. So a little bit different on the governance side. They don't have to adhere to some of the opening meeting laws that we do in terms of posting agendas, things of that nature. But again, we operate essentially for the same purpose, just a little different governance structure that overlays how we go about business.
So moving forward, I suppose in the event that the ECI does pass, and a lot of these things need to be considered as part of the legislative task for the next few years, but do the power districts continue to operate in the same fashion? From what particular end? Okay, is it the voting rights that are granted right now to the governmental, the governance organization, or the co-op, things that will change dramatically.
Right.
Do you have a feel for that, David?
Right, so that's really the $64 question that we all have. I pointed out, Rudy, that what people are voting on ballot question number 3, and I know you're very well aware of it, but for your audience, it's a one paragraph statement. Question 3 is literally one paragraph long that will completely, if it passes again in November general election, will completely transform what the electric utility industry in the state of Nevada is going to look like. And so, all of the questions that the question you're answering cannot really be answered from what is exactly known today in that ballot initiative, because again, all it says is it places into the Constitution of the state of Nevada the right for every person, regardless of where they live, whether it be Las Vegas or Mesquite or Castleton, Nevada, or any other place in the state of Nevada, the right to choose their electric provider. So we know that ballot question 3 directly impacts the power districts. It directly impacts the electric cooperatives as well. That's also been reaffirmed by the Public Utility Commission in its report, because you can't have a constitutional amendment that only affects part of the people in the state. You can't say in the Constitution the people in Vegas get this right, but the people in Castleton don't get that right. It is a constitutional amendment. And that's we'll talk in a moment, I'm sure, about some of my concerns with this, and that's clearly one of the big concerns is we're trying to do energy policy in a one paragraph question 3 initiative, and that's not a really good way to go about doing it. But the direct answer, it will impact the power district. Now, the big question, the $64 question, is the extent of how it will impact the power districts. And that's going to be determined by the state legislature. They have until July of 2023 to implement all the laws that will fully enact it. But we as power districts, I think, and the cooperatives as well, all have some pretty high-level concerns about how this is going to go forward based upon the testimony of those that are pushing this. We can look at what they have been saying in terms of impacts on the rural parts of the state. We can also look to other states where this has been implemented. There are 14 states in the United States that did this some 20 years ago. Nobody's done it since then. For the last 20 years, everybody's kind of pulled back from this, but we're moving forward here in the state with this initiative. And based on those concerns, what I can say to my consumers when they ask me this, and I think every rural utility can say the same thing to their folks. There is nothing in ballot question 3 that will benefit rural Nevada. We can make that pretty much a definitive statement, and we can talk about that in a minute in terms of how I can make that kind of statement. There's really nothing in there that will benefit us. There is a lot in there, depending upon where the state legislature writes the laws, implement, that can hurt us. So it really comes down to us looking at this and going, well, why would we want to support and vote for something that really has no benefit to rural Nevada, but if implemented in an inappropriate way or an incorrect way, has tremendous downside risk? And so that's didn't directly get to your question, but hopefully kind of sets the scene for, again, kind of why we're having a lot of concern here.
Well, let me ask again. The constitutional effect with the one paragraph statement that may pass in November or may not, but when it does, the constitutional effect is complete, or is there still legislation that needs to be completed, and then the Constitution is amended by that legislation? Is that
right? So the Constitution will be amended immediately, but the way the Constitution will be amended is it will recognize, because if you look at the language of the initiative, it will recognize that the implementation laws still have to be written. And this is an enormous task, and that's why at least the proponents that wrote the initiative, I have a lot of problems with the way the initiative is written. I think it is highly misleading, and we can talk about that. But the one thing they did recognize, and rightfully so, this is not going to be easy. So they realized that it would take several legislative sessions to implement this, and most likely there'll be a considerable amount of legal action and lawsuits that will also come out of it. But if it passes in November 2018, the legislature will get 3 chances to get all those laws written and all the regulations at the Public Utility Commission, the 2019 session, 2021, and then 2023. Now, they might accelerate that, but they have at least those 3 sessions to write literally a volume of laws that will have to be written to make this thing work.
Do you foresee that volume of laws, I mean, you say it may have a negative impact on rural power, or may not change it at all, depending on the law that's being passed?
Okay.
Is that also a possibility?
Yeah, absolutely. So here's the one of the, there's lots of negatives, but I'll just throw out one, just so you get kind of, again, a basis for my statement that I don't see, we can say in rural Nevada there's really no upside to this, but there's a lot of risk. So here in Lincoln County, well, we'll start more generically. In rural Nevada, by the rural utilities, 60% of the power in rural Nevada comes from hydropower from the federal government. Here in Lincoln County, it's even more. We get about 80% of our power from Hoover Dam. Wells Rural Electric up in along the Idaho, northern Nevada border, up around the Elko Wells area. They actually get about 90% of their power from the federal government, so they're even a little bit higher. But each one's a little bit different percentage, but overall, you get the picture. One of the things that the proponents have stated is that in order for there to be retail competition, they've made it clear that incumbent utilities should not be retail energy providers. And their statement being that if you're there, you have an unfair advantage. And nobody else will be able to come into the area and start selling power because you're there, you've got the best cost structure, things of that nature. So they've made it very clear in their testimony that existing utilities should not be retail energy providers. So if the legislature takes that concept forward as they write the laws and regulations and say Lincoln County Power District or any of the other rural utilities, you cannot be a retail energy provider, that Hoover Dam resource or that hydropower is going to be lost to this county, Lincoln County. Hoover Dam power is not available to these new private entities. It's set up under federal law. Only organizations like us and others can get it. It's a federal law. It doesn't matter what happens in the state of Nevada with a constitutional amendment. So if we're not able to sell power in Lincoln County, if the law doesn't allow us to be a retail energy provider, that benefit of Hoover Power is going to go away. And that is huge for a place like any of rural Nevada, but huge for Lincoln County. Our rate structure, we are so remote and we have so few customers. Our fixed operating costs are quite high, as you can imagine. You get in the metro areas, NV Energy, I don't know the exact statistic off the top of my head, but they have something like 50 to 70 customers per mile. I have 2 customers per mile. I have extremely high fixed operating costs. The only way I can have affordable rates in Lincoln County is if I'm able to get that federal hydropower, which is about 50% of market costs right now today, if you were to compare market costs for that, and utilize that in Lincoln County. If that is lost, okay, if I'm not selling power, my customers are going to be providing from a new for-profit corporation. I don't make a profit, so there's a markup right away. They're going to be paying taxes. As a political subdivision, I don't pay taxes. They're not going to be getting Hoover, which I get. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to add up those numbers and realize if I'm not selling power in Lincoln County, the rates in Lincoln County are going to go up, and they're going to go up significantly. And when I've been out talking to people about my concern, one of the things I try to make clear, Rudy, is there's not a single employee at Lincoln County Power District that's going to lose their job if Question 3 passes and this worst case is implemented. My employees are largely involved in maintaining electrical poles and wires and things of that nature. So my fixed costs are going to stay the same. So this isn't about Lincoln County Power District trying to protect turf. It's about rates in rural Nevada, and that's where me as a general manager, president of NREA, we get very concerned about this. Again, not a lot of chance for benefit here, but a whole lot of risk.
That's an interesting point. Hydroelectric power will not be a choice for the consumer?
Right. So I want to correct that. If I'm not allowed to be a retail energy provider because I'm an existing incumbent utility, right. That's right. Hoover Dam, these new guys, these new retail providers, they're private corporations. They're not going to be able to buy Hoover Dam power. So that's not going to be available to them.
So
you're right.
will it be a choice for the consumer?
No,
No, we will lose a choice.
you lose that choice.
Okay, that's for all federally
Yes,
generated.
right. And so in
powers.
Nevada, we're very fortunate as a state. Us folks, utilities in the south, we get benefit from the Colorado River, Glen Canyon, Parker Davis, and Hoover Dams. The folks in the north, like Wells Rural Electric, Raft River, some of the rural cooperatives along the Nevada-Idaho border, they all get their hydropower from the Columbia River. So people don't realize, again, 60% of the power coming into rural Nevada is actually coming from federal hydropower sources. Big number.
Wow. What does that do to our solar plants? We have a large one in Tonopah, which is, the salt-driven one, I suppose. Huge developments along I-15 in Clark County. Is there any impact there? Will customers or consumers be able to choose those powers?
Right. So, now you're kind of asking a question that I'll take off my Lincoln County Power District General Manager hat on and more talk as a member of the Governor's Committee on Energy Choices as we were looking at it, because again, you're asking a more global question, which is a very good question about the impacts of question 3 on renewable development generally in the state and some of the big projects that exist right now. Quite honestly, those projects are going to be in big trouble. Solar development costs have come, especially photovoltaic costs, have come down tremendously over the last few years. Those are concentrator type facilities, a little higher operating costs, so they're going to have to be competing in the marketplace at the wholesale level with a whole bunch of renewables that have a whole lot of different advantages to them. So the short answer to your question is, I think there's a lot of people concerned that a lot of these bigger renewable projects are going to be negatively impacted, and I think that's why, and I know you probably have, but for some of your folks that are listening, and I probably won't get their organizations quite right, but as people have really started to study this issue in all its form, the folks like the Sierra Club and several of the other major environmental organizations and entities in the state of Nevada have now all come out against question 3 because they've done that analysis and said, wait a minute, it's going to be very hard to develop these big renewable projects in this type of environment where it's all based on cost at the retail level.
The Governor's Committee, in summarizing their activity, has put together, I think it's 2 or 3 pages that talks about these technological advantages that we currently have, renewable energy, and how we're not going to lose sight of that in legislating the ECI. Is that possibly nice thinking or nice forward look, but
right.
practical?
You're exactly right. You have to, and I think all of us, especially in rural Nevada, and Westerners in general, we kind of tend towards competition, and we understand that concept that, if you have competition, it's a good idea. So we always kind of start from that framework of mind. But what gets lost when you really drive a market strictly down to a competitive basis, a power market, is if you have any social desires or other desires that are not competitive, they're going to be negatively impacted. And so, right now in the state of Nevada, we have renewable portfolio standards. Those are legislated standards that are driven by a social desire. I'm not commenting whether they're good or bad, but what I'm saying is the legislature can say, we want to see more solar in the state of Nevada, or we want to see more wind in the state of Nevada, and so they can legislate that, and that is implemented through regulation with the Public Utility Commission, and the utilities that are jurisdictional have to comply with that as they move forward in time and meet those targets and objectives. Well, the premise of what's going on in question 3 is economic competition. And so you're seeing this kind of globally. If you go back to the eastern states, what is going on is you're seeing a lot of the existing power infrastructure being shut down, nuclear power plants and others, because they are not able to compete on a purely economic basis, because it all drives to economics. What is the most economical power plant today? natural gas, by far. That's why natural gas is just exploding all over the United States. Again, whether it's good or bad, I'm not going to comment on that, but the glut of natural gas is at a historic lows, so it's driving down wholesale market prices. So the most economical resource out there is natural gas, and it's going to drive the market here if we let it be purely economics. And so that's what this is all about. And so again, it's a long answer to a very good question is, yes, those things like large-scale renewables are definitely at risk under question 3.
Well, the retail market is much larger than Nevada, obviously, and probably not so much concerned about Nevada per se, although we do have, I suppose, some input with the Powers and Utilities Commission that will be formed as part of the legislation, I think.
Well, and you're raising another very good point, Rudy. In order to have a retail marketplace, you have to have a wholesale marketplace. We do not have a wholesale market in the state of Nevada. Right now, everything is what are called bilateral transactions. I make arrangements with a company and buy power from that specific company. If you look at the 14 states where retail choice, energy choice exists today, they are operating within a structured wholesale market. So there's a market operator that actually bids out the power comes in, they set the prices, everybody's buying through the marketplace, and then they're going out and finding their retail customers. The only wholesale market in the western United States is the California Independent System Operator, CAISO. It's been operating for a period of time in California. It is likely the only scenario for us in the state of Nevada because we're too small to develop a wholesale market here. Utah and others are not in wholesale markets, they're still in bilaterals, so the states around us, California is the only market that exists today. They're about 10 to 12 times bigger than the state of Nevada in terms of their electric market structure. They're governed by a 5-member body that is appointed by the governor of the state of California. So if we move into that marketplace and start letting them run the wholesale market for the state of Nevada, those 5 appointees by the governor of California will be dictating the energy policy of the state of Nevada. Now the proponents of ECI, question 3, say, yeah, but we'll get that changed. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. But again, it's one of those things. As you vote on November 3rd, or 6th, you don't know what that outcome is going to be. That is another one of these risk factors, a big unknown. You're voting on a 1 paragraph that's going to take a lot to implement it. Will the governor and the legislature of California concede control of some of that marketplace to Nevadans? And why this is important, I'll just give you one example. Transmission rates. We'll have to turn over our transmission system to California to operate because they have to operate it. Mm-hmm. We'll still maintain it here in Nevada, the utilities, but they'll set the rates and they'll operate it as a whole so that these marketers can use it. They can use the grid and get it from where they're buying power and get it to you as a consumer. They've got to have access to the grid, so you have to operate it as a whole. The rates in California for transmission, for their transmission grid, are a little different the way they set them, but $11.04 per megawatt hours. Here in Nevada, the grid is at $2.65 per kilowatt. Now, that's not an apples and apples comparison. One's a volumetric, one's a capacity rate. But if you convert them at 100% capacity factor, California's transmission grid is about 3.2 times higher cost than Nevada's. Will they grandfather us and lower our rates, or will they just take our system in and charge the new higher rate to all of the Nevada utilities? Again, unknown questions that people are voting on. Go ahead.
Is it just a matter of rate setting, or are we also somewhat concerned with what they will do to operating the grid? Because they may, I suppose, require certain items, technological advantages or disadvantages that are here or there, and they may specify that those need to be put in place. Is that something that's also a risk?
Oh, absolutely. So all future planning runs through the CAISO, so they will make the decision whether a transmission investment is a good investment. and can be rate-based into this new, larger grid system that's operated for California and Nevada. So if we, Lincoln County Power District, want to build something, we would have to convince them that this is a transmission improvement that should be done and should be put into this larger rate base. And so they'll be the ones that'll be deciding that. Should we build a line to Utah? Maybe, maybe not. They'll get to make that call as the operator of the transmission grid. So yeah, it's a lot of risk there, a lot of unknown.
So when we look at value, value as perceived by Nevadans, okay, there's an economic one or not, because rural Nevadans will probably not have the same economic advantage under DCI. There's also a social one, which may or not be, of value to Nevada residents, but it's something we certainly will not be able to address once we, under the broader, I suppose, retail market, which is multi-state, or maybe just California controlled. So the value that we as Nevadans have for our, I guess, generating power, not generating power, actually getting power delivered, okay, whether it's economic or whether it's social values that we see as being something we want or need. It's something that may be allowed or disallowed by an entity that's not Nevada.
That's right.
That's essentially what...
That's exactly right. You said it better than I did. That's exactly right.
Okay. So, to finalize, the next 4 years, if they can, the legislatures will attempt to, I suppose, put together legislation, some laws, regulations that, surround the ECI. But what will actually happen? Will these laws then become embedded in the Constitution?
So not in the Constitution. They'll go in
other words, those laws will be subject to change.
They'll be subject to change. What can never be changed is the. So if you look at the one paragraph that will go into the Constitution, Rudy, a couple things that won't ever change unless the Constitution is amended, and it would take a pretty enormous effort to do that. Is one, every person in the state of Nevada, and it has a long list, every person, business, association, etc., political subdivision, has the right to choose. So your right to choose will be in the Constitution. And then if you further read in that paragraph, there will be no longer any utility monopolies. There will no longer be a vertically integrated utility system in the state of Nevada, where a utility has a generation plant, has a transmission line, has the district. Ultimately be decided by 63 members of the state legislature, and as I can remind people, if you look at the 63 people that are in the state legislature, only 5 of them come from areas we serve. So the laws are going to be written by 63 people, and only 5 of them really have a grasp on rural Nevada. That's why, again, a ton of risk, and not a lot of benefit here.
How do we encourage our legislature to get a grasp?
Well,
so to speak.
And I encourage all the folks in any of the rural areas, to be in contact. I think we, at the rural utilities, all of the rural utilities have done a yeoman's job right now to date. Just so you know, 4 counties have actually already come out against energy choice. Lincoln, White Pine, Eureka, and I believe Elko has just come out. I'm not 100% clear on that one. Farm Bureau has come out against this. Cattlemen's Association has come out against it. Nevada Mining Association has come out against it. AARP has come out against it. The list goes on and on. When you look at that list, what's really clear is normal working people realize the concern here. And I think a lot of them are doing a good job of contacting legislatures and talking to them and really expressing those concerns, but everybody should be doing that.
Is it a concern that the legislatures don't understand or don't want to understand? I've recently asked for some comments from our federal candidates for office, congressional, Senate, governor, and I received no comments.
Right.
None. Is the political concern that they may be misunderstood? Or?
Right, and that's you nailed it right on the head. This is a complicated issue because again, you think about what's got to occur. We just kind of talked at a very high level of all these things, wholesale markets and things of this nature, and consumer protections, and on it goes. quite frankly, very few of the legislatures have a very good handle on this. There are a few that are very good. Chris Brooks, Assemblyman Chris Brooks being one of them, and many others. But again, for the most of them, this is not what they deal with. This takes utility professionals, not just people like me. I'm talking economics and consultants and a lot of very high dollar lawyers and people that specialize this in their entire life. And that's the big concern right there. We're voting on one paragraph telling 63 legislatures in the state and assembly, go do this, and they have no idea what they're going to do. Right. And we're asking them to get it right. Clay Fitch is the general manager at Wellsboro Electric, and I was at he was making a presentation to some of his folks here, and he used an interesting analogy, which I thought it was really a good one. And he was telling them, this is kind of like deciding to buy a car, but not knowing the model, not knowing the make, not knowing how much it's going to cost, but just saying, send me a car. And everything else, not even knowing what is going to happen. That's what we're voting on in this one paragraph. And it's fundamentally, potentially going to restructure the entire industry. It's a lot of risk.
Senator Joe Hardy did spend some time to talk to me about this, and he's mainly concerned with the fact that we're changing the Constitution, and wow, it's going to have an impact, and it's hard to reverse course once we get there. Right. So, but anyway. And
sadly, one other point, and I'm sure you're aware of this, Rudy. The people that are going to get hurt by this, there is no question big business is going to win if Question 3 passes. They have the sophistication to get out in the marketplace and make it happen. And in fact, 704B already in the NRS already allows them to be doing this. And so you look at some of the folks like Wynn Resorts, they're already out in the market doing this, and it's working for them. But I encourage you to look at what's going on in the state of Massachusetts. It's one of the energy choice states. It did it 20 years ago, like when there was that wave. Just recently, in March and April, the Attorney General for the state of Massachusetts is really trying to push an initiative to roll back what they're doing there and go back to the system that existed before. Because what happens is the elderly, the disadvantaged, are taken advantage of by marketers, because you're going to have marketers working in this, calling you up and getting you to convince, promising you a lower rate, and then your bill goes up 3 months later. So.
Have you seen the commercials on TV?
Yeah.
They're atrocious, aren't they?
They are atrocious. It's one of the most expensive campaigns this election season.
Right. Now, Warren Buffett has come up against it, so
yes,
he's spending a little money there too. I hope it's enough to get people's attention. But anyway, well, David, I think we have everything, and really appreciate you doing this. And
yeah, absolutely. And if you got other questions that I can answer as you go forward, please let me know.
Okay. I will when we get to, I guess, I don't know if there's much chance of defeating this, but there's some light at the end of the tunnel, perhaps. But
I think so.
I think the most of the work that will remain to happen will be, this coming session.
I agree. Regardless of whether it is defeated or not in November, I think there's going to be a lot of activity in the legislation related to energy. Regardless, what all of this is pointed out, Question 3, Question 6 on this initiative, the last legislative session, if you've tracked it, there is a high degree of interest in Nevada. Primarily the interest revolves around renewables, and that's a good thing. And creating opportunities for further renewable development, and that's what Question 6 is all about. But I just would point out, as we're kind of concluding this, Rudy, is Question 3 and Question 6, the proponents of Question 6 are actually not supporting the Question 3.
They're thinking off-grid, aren't they?
Exactly. They see the impact on renewables. But yeah, I'm with you. Regardless, there will be a lot of legislation this session that will keep us engaged.
The unfortunate part is Utah, 20 years ago, attempted to do the same thing. However, there was a big scandal in California at the time, but they decided not to.
Right. Well, the same thing happened here in Nevada. Again, for newcomers to the state of Nevada, Nevada actually was going down the same road. All the western states were in 1999 to do what we're talking about today, this deregulation and retail choice. And the Enron scandal happened in California. that's what happens when you have private motivation, private profit motivation. You better have in place a lot of good regulations to keep market manipulation from not occurring.
And where are you going to get these regulations from? From FERC? No.
Yeah. So they created the 704B law here in the state of Nevada. So we stopped it for everybody else, but that's where that law came from that allows the big players to go out today. So yeah, we did the same thing.
Right. Well, I do have an expert on my team. I already know him. He 20 years ago was familiar with he was at the Public Utility Commission in Utah. His name was Alt.
Yeah.
He wrote a book on rate setting in the old days, and so he's still reluctant to participate because of, exposure.
Right.
He doesn't want that. He's too old. He says, I can't fight these people off. Anyway. Well, it was a pleasure meeting you, and it was a pleasure hearing you provide this information. I'm sure it's very helpful to all the viewers.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that discussion, or it made you a bit more informative for your vote on Tuesday. And again, you need to really understand energy choice. If you have some questions or doubts, the word monopoly is very strangely used for proponents of energy choice. Yes, okay, but I need to caution you a little bit. First of all, we're not talking about monopolies. We are talking about, something like when somebody builds a highway, how many highway builders do there need to be? There's only one, it happens to be the federal government. That's a monopoly. Also power distribution lines. I mean, how many power distribution lines do you really need? You need competitive lines? That doesn't make any sense. It has to be a single provider. The provider is, however, regulated by either a board that's voted by the public, voted in, that regulates the power district, or the Power Utilities Commission. So that's regulated. That's what it means, regulated. So that the Nevada Power, for example, they can't really charge whatever they want. Monopoly is able to do that. They can charge and do whatever they want because they are the monopoly. Nevada Power is not a monopoly. The Power Utilities Commission, manages and makes them, but they go out in a fair free market and they buy energy at those fair prices, okay? The other things that they do, they will still be doing that, okay? They will still be practicing that same, what we call monopoly practice, under the control of the Power Utilities Commissions. Anyway, we note that the proponents of the ballot measure insist that existing utilities should divest themselves of their power-generating assets and current contracts to purchase power. Divest themselves of their power-generating assets and current contracts to purchase power. What? If they put out a solar panel field, they're not allowed to do that anymore. They're not allowed to. Huh? And current contracts to purchase power. In other words, they go out into the free market to purchase power. They're not allowed to do that because that would be competing against. Who are these people that they're competing against? Well, as far as I know, these are the same people out of Texas that want to produce or that want to bestow this wonderful new energy choice upon us. Remember Enron. Anyway, we'll be right back after this word. The D-Thai Bistro, a refreshing oasis in the desert. D-Thai Bistro may be the only Thai restaurant in Mesquite, but it ranks among the finest in the state of Nevada, as well as southwestern Utah and northeastern Arizona. An extensive menu features many Asian delights. Traditional Thai dishes include all your favorites: Pad Thai, Pad See Ew, Pad Won Sen, Tom Yum soup, Tom Kha soup, and a variety of curries are prepared and served to your pleasure. The chefs and the staff of the Thai Bistro provide a pleasant, friendly atmosphere. The dishes are delightfully presented, fresh and superbly flavored, and delicious. My own personal favorite, spring roll, is not on the menu, but if you ask for the Rudy roll, the chef will be happy to oblige. Lunch and dinner are served daily, starting at 11 a.m. and reopening after lunch at 4:30 p.m. for dinner. The bistro is closed on Sundays. Takeout orders are welcome. The D-Thai Bistro has obtained a solid 5-howl rating from the Mesquite Weekly, and customer reviews consistently provide glowing praise for this family-owned and managed house of Thai culinary delights. So, if you paid careful attention to what David Luttrell has said, he says that industrial and commercial customers already have a retail choice. I've said that also, and so has management from the Overton Power District, and so has Nevada Energy. So any customer with electrical needs greater than 1 megawatt, such as casinos, mines, and industrial operations, already have the right to buy their own energy. The problem, and this is why Switch and Sands and MGM and others don't like it, is in order to exercise that right, they have to pay an exit fee from the grid, from the Nevada energy system. And they don't like paying that exit fee. That's it. That's it. Why do they have to pay an energy fee? Well, all of the power providers or utility providers, what they did was, in order to build and structure these contracts, some of them are long-term, okay? And they require that they purchase a certain amount of energy. So when somebody exits, who's going to pick up the tab for when the contracts fall short? Who? Us. And they don't like that. So they want to give us an energy choice. The choice will be that our energy rates will just skyrocket, as they have elsewhere in the country. If you do your homework on this one, you'll see the light will dawn. You will see it. So when you vote on Tuesday, don't vote for your pocketbook, because you're loaded anyway, at least in the Mesquite area where everybody's over 65. Vote for the pocketbooks of your successors, your children, your grandchildren, because they're the ones that will be paying, because they can no longer purchase hydroelectric power, directly or indirectly. So think about it. Vote on Tuesday and vote the right way. This is Rudy Mortel signing off until the next time, and we'll be back to talk about the post-election special and why we got into the mess we did. A couple of predictions before we go any further. I predict that Dean Heller will retain the Senate seat. I predict that Governor Sisolak will take the governor's chair. I predict that in CD4, it's a toss-up, hard to say. Okay. As I said before, we've had a good response from a lot of wonderful legislature in our state legislature, but unfortunately, we have two legislators who are certain to win. State Senator Joe Hardy, I predict he will retain his seat as the state senator for District 12. And we have an assemblyman by the name of Chris Edwards who has no opponent, not in the primary or in the general. So he's going to take his seat on the assembly again this year, and we wish them both success in doing so. We've tried to obtain comments from some of the other candidates, and even though we talked to them, they were reluctant to talk about energy choice. I think the exception was Dina Titus, but she's not in this congressional district, but she is definitely against energy choice. We found very few people that wanted to talk about it. No comments. Don't know why. You should ask them, but it's too late. Next time around, be sure to ask them. when you know what the results of it was. Why didn't they speak up? Next time around. 2020. Talk to you later. Post-election comments coming up next weekend. Until then, have a wonderful evening. Make sure you do go and vote, particularly on these energy choices. And we'll see you then. Good night.